Welcome to Very Honored Fraternity's Esoterinerd podcast, episode 47, in which I interview Jason Augustus Newcomb. But first, I wanted to let you all know that the David Bowie Oracle Cards Deck 6 is now available for download. I was speaking with a guest that's going to be in an upcoming episode of the Esoterinerd, Jonathan Sims, and he pointed out that David Bowie and Brian Eno themselves actually used a very similar method called oblique strategies. If you're in front of a computer, pull up the URL edward-reib, and that's reib.com/Ask David Bowie. No hyphens, no spaces, nothing. Eventually there will be 31 plus decks and 31 plus corresponding key cards. The key cards will be used to determine which deck you will draw your answer from. The first 7 decks, Deck 0, Liza Jane, through Deck 6, Aladdin Sane, are currently available for download, with instructions on how to print them and how to use them. Our guest tonight caught the occult community by surprise with a very fun advertisement for the Enochian chess set that he's producing.
Enochian is the language of the angels.
And if you haven't seen it, I sincerely hope that after we're done here, you will go look it up and watch it, because you should.
Each set includes complete instructions, including 2 variants that can actually make the game fun to play.
And so, without further ado, let's get to that interview, shall we? Greetings, Frater. Welcome to the Esoterinerd podcast.
Hi.
I love the ad. I mean, just to start off, that was great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was a lot of fun. Are those relatives of yours in the...
Yeah, those are my kids.
Nice. Very cute.
And yeah, we decided that we were going to put together some ads. That's really going to be the first of a number of ads that are going to be coming out.
Well, if the other ones are anything like that, then I look forward to it. That was hilarious.
Cool. Yeah. I wanted to do that one first because, my kids wanted to be a part of it. They like to be a part of things. So
yeah,
we could all do
I
together.
love that shirt that your older daughter was wearing.
Yeah, that's from my book, The New Hermetics.
Cool.
That's the symbol from that. My name is Jason Augustus Newcomb. I don't think we've said that.
Yeah. I said it in the intro, but yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind, if I nerd out a little bit, would you mind breaking down the meaning? Because I know most esoteric nerds know the meaning right off the top of their head of those 3 names. But what does Jason mean?
Jason is a Greek hero. He is
with the Argonauts, right?
Yes, he was with the Argonauts. He's actually the name that Joshua was often converted to Jesus in Greek times. So the name Jesus and the name Joshua and the name Jason are all sort of cognate terms in a lot of ways. My mother named me Augustus because she kind of was a magical thinker in some ways, although she considers herself very logical. But I was born in August, and they were somewhat interested in astrology at the time. So I have this picture of me in a cradle that my dad made, that he'd made like stained glass on either side. There was their 2 signs, and then there's a sun on top that light would shine through, and then in the back was like a glyph of it's like a lion and a sunrise. It's like I've got it somewhere.
Nice.
It's sort of a magical symbol that they created for me. So I mean, they weren't really interested in occultism in the way that I've grown to be interested in it, but they certainly there were interesting things around the house for me to discover as I grew up. Let's put it that way. My last name Newcomb, I believe it means like new town or something like that in English, Old English. One of my family names is Kells, which is either Germanic or Irish. We're not really quite sure which branch of that is. So, My children I named fairly consciously. My first daughter's name is Aurora, which is the goddess of the dawn. My second daughter is named Elena, which is the Greek Helena.
You took my queen.
Yes. Yes.
Aurora was. I love how I'm learning the dark arts while I play.
Exactly. And my son is Apollo, and he's the one who says
Osiris is a black god.
And yeah.
Now, was that a reference to just the fact that he was holding up the Earth piece?
Yeah, that's I think that's Crowley mentions that in one of the ethers.
Okay.
I think it actually it's referenced somewhere in ancient writings as well.
Okay.
But it just sounded like a funny thing.
Yeah. It's a good close.
Especially to freak out my parents. Anyway, so they all have fairly magical names.
Very cool.
Oh yeah, and my wife named all the daughters' middle names in various forms of Anne. There's Anastasia and Annabella because her middle name is Anne. And since my middle name was Augustus, we wanted to somehow honor the fact that my mom had named me after the month. So Apollo's a Scorpio, so his middle name is Scorpius.
Nice.
He's Apollo Scorpius Newcomb.
And Anastasia, the resurrection.
Yeah, he seems a little bit like he may be a supervillain from his name.
That's awesome.
But we'll see. So I became very interested in occultism, largely Golden Dawn stuff and Aleister Crowley stuff, pretty early on. Around age 12 or 13 was when I really got seriously interested. Although I'd had a set of tarot before then, and the themes of occultism in my life pretty much came up pretty early. I became very interested in Kabbalah. I had mostly like Golden Dawn oriented Kabbalah. It's only been in the last really probably 10 or 15 years that I've really realized how quite different Hebrew Kabbalah is from Golden Dawn Kabbalah, and how much they don't really interact very much at all. And I'm somewhat interested in the Jewish version, although not as a personal religious thing. Just sort of, I'm kind of a historical nerd of religious stuff.
Yeah, it definitely goes along with it.
Yeah. So my books, 21st Century Mage, is really about the Holy Guardian Angel operation in a modern context. That was my first book that I published through Red Wheel Wiser. Or Wiser Books at the time. And then The New Hermetics is a book in which I combine a lot of ideas about hypnosis, non-induction oriented hypnosis, NLP, and that sort of stuff, along with magical work, and tried to create a kind of a way in which a person could be doing magical practices even when they aren't at their altar. You know, that there's always ways of utilizing your consciousness and your visionary skills to be directing your life the way that you want them to go, even away from the altar. And I kind of got associated with that idea a lot, and people thought that I was sort of anti-ritual or something.
Chaos magic or something, yeah.
What? Yeah, like, chaos magic, or just not interested in actual physical rituals, which I never really tried to to say, but but I kind of got associated with that.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a third book called Sexual Sorcery that was also published by Wiser Books. And then I've kind of broken off on my own, and I've published quite a few other things. Probably the most notable of them is a book called The Book of Magic Power, in which I combine together a lot of different stuff, from everything from psychic development to sort of simple versions of ritual magic to astral projection, all that kind of stuff, all kind of under one cover. And it's quite an extensive book. It's got like over 200 different activities that you could explore within it. And that one's done. I self-published that one, and it's actually done quite well, about as well as anything else that I've done. And that's available in a number of formats, including audiobook. At this point, it just recently became an audiobook. Nice. But you wanted me to be on here talking about Enochian chess.
Yeah, let me just to give you a little bit. I went through. Enochian was introduced to me during my Zelator initiation in the form of the Hierophant pointing to a northern tablet saying, these
Sure.
are the 3 secret names of God. So I got the quote-unquote traditional pre-Crowleyan introduction to Enochian, and then when I got into 5.6, I learned all the calls and started working with the more advanced stuff and the watchtowers and what have you. However, I have never learned Enochian chess, and so even though I'm kind of like, I've left most of the ceremonial magic life behind and I'm focusing on yoga and meditation these days, I still kind of like the idea of learning Enochian chess one day. I want you to teach me Enochian chess right now here.
Okay, well,
and tell me about your background with it and whatever you can about it. And
my interest, I did join a Golden Dawn order, and I've been through a few of the degrees in that, and I've been involved in other orders, but I did not go all the way through to the 5.6 in Golden Dawn. So, but I do have a more a book relationship with the Golden Dawn. The Israel Regardie's big, the first big one, the Llewellyn softcover Golden Dawn book was something that I've had for many years. And has always been of interest to me, and the Enochian part in that book is quite convoluted and confusing, really, honestly, including the discussion of Enochian chess. Now, as far as I know, there's no completely conclusive instructions on how Enochian chess would have been played within the Order of the Golden Dawn that have come down to us. The Zalewskis have some material, and they wrote a great book on Enochian chess. It's huge, and in that book they discuss what they believe to be what the rules would be from everything that can be inferred, and they think that it's pretty closely related to just four-handed chess of the Chaturanga, I think is the name.
You know, I think I have that book. I haven't cracked it open yet, but
it's a big and intimidating book considering it's about a board game. But you know, as far as the gameplay itself, it plays very similarly to chess. Most of the pieces move in exactly the same way. The queen moves in a slightly different way, and I think the knight moves in a slightly different way. I can't remember. I'm not. You're catching me off guard.
I'm sorry.
No, I haven't actually played the game in over a year myself.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you the background of the project. I had a buddy of mine come and stay with me for a few months, and at that time we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we made an Enochian chess set and played it for a while, and we did. And we actually made, I think, 3 different versions of it. All of them had problems. And this version that I've created, I feel like it actually plays fairly well, because one of the problems is the pieces all look similar to each other. And if you just have the color backgrounds on the little bodies of the Egyptian gods, or on their clothing, it's sometimes very difficult to tell which piece you're even looking at on the board. So I've made the color of the pieces very central to the design of the pieces in order to really make it very obvious which element and which sub element they belong to.
Right.
But I mean, the game itself is basically, you've got 4 sets of pieces, but they're each half of a normal chess set. Although there's extra queen and a king in the situation. But other than that, you've basically got a half of a regular chess set and each. You play it in a team manner, so you've got the earth and water element working together, and they go across the board along the horizontal line, and you've got the fire and air element, and they go across it up and down. So basically, you're kind of intersecting each other in the way that you're battling with one another, and it makes for kind of an interesting gameplay. But I mean, it's ultimately very similar to chess, and a lot of the strategies of chess play into it.
And there's 4 boards, though.
Yes, and each of the 4 boards has a slightly different arrangement of the elements and sub-elements. The way that the Order of the Golden Dawn had it, and what that does is it changes the way that you set the pieces up. Whether you set up the king, queen, rook, knight, etc., or whether you make it queen, knight, rook. So basically, whichever element is ruling the file of the one that is the main pieces you set. I think there's 8 basic setups that you can have of the pieces. But it doesn't really affect the game all that much unless you're an extremely experienced chess player, and that would.
Or if you're using it for divination.
And that's the other thing is that a lot of times what you're doing is you're setting up a question and then playing out the game. And the way that the Golden Dawn, the only way that the Golden Dawn, I think, from what the Zalewski say would make it really related to divination was to start who got to start. You'd roll a die, but then other than that, you're playing chess. So if you ask a question and you put someone in the seat of the answer that you don't want, who's a really good chess player, you're actually playing against yourself on your divination. Because it's like it is still a
choose
strategy
your tarot
game.
reader wisely.
Right. So, but I've created a couple of variants on the game that I'm not gonna get into here because then people wouldn't
buy it. Yeah. Well, but
that,
I the good solid, the fact that it's not flimsy, and that's a pretty good selling point.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I would like to think that one day I would be motivated enough to sit down and whittle out of wood some little god forms. I'd like to.
It's interesting that you say that because I actually that was the first thing I started to do. I actually have I think 4 out of the 5 different basic shapes of the king queen. I was thinking I'd just make a set that would just have sort of it wouldn't have the detailed god forms on it. It would just be sort of chess pieces that were somewhat like the gods, the general way that they would be standing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was okay, but then in looking at the different forms, it suddenly somewhat seemed important to me that one of them had a crocodile head and one of them had a hippopotamus. It seemed like that it was too much a part of what you were doing to leave that out and not have it feel odd.
Yeah.
So then I switched back and I tried using just card stuck into those little standees, and that worked okay. Like I said in the commercial, though, when you buy a bunch of those little standees, some of them will grab the piece quite strongly, but other ones will always be loose, and so you're constantly having your pieces fall apart while you're trying to play the game, and that's just not that much fun. But anyway, the 4 boards would really be most useful in if you're using it for divination. Other than that, any board really works fine if you're just playing it purely as a game.
Right.
But a couple of my variants take into account the elemental nature of the squares, and so what square you're on becomes very important to how the game plays out. So I don't I think that we've had 150 years of gaming since the Golden Dawn was playing around with this idea.
Yeah.
And I think that, I
that's
think
why Candyland's pretty boring too. Yeah.
Right. I mean, in a way, Enochian chess is kind of like Candyland, except that there's a little more strategy in it. But it's just you basically are just moving pieces around, and the way the pieces move obviously is different, but the relative strength of the pieces is not different, and whatever place they land on the board has no real relevance to the way that the outcome of the interaction takes place. So there's really no the boards themselves could just be regular chess boards, and the game would still play essentially the same as it seems to be through the Golden Dawn. So I think there's lots of room for
development.
For what's that? Yeah, for developing and evolving the game, and particularly the divinatory aspect of it, because the divinatory aspect of it is fairly interesting. There's there's a bunch of different symbols on each square. The geomancy, which is something that do you like geomancy at all? Or?
Yeah, I've got Concourse of the Watchtowers in front of me by Tabitha Cicero. I think that might actually help to give a boost to some Enochian chess, to bring in these extra symbols and bring in all the scales that Westcott had on his tablets. It'd be fun.
Absolutely, I've seen her stuff.
Yeah,
I went to a talk and she had.
I've asked her twice to be on the Esoterinerd. If anybody knows Tabitha and Chick, please send word.
I know her.
Oh, you do? Oh,
I'll be happy to send her.
Let her know that I would love to have her on the Esoterinerd. I'd love to have her and Chick, but specifically Tabitha to talk about some of this stuff. But
yeah, they live about an hour away from me. So.
Oh, nice. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
So does
we probably have a lot of you and I probably have a lot of friends in common that we don't realize we have.
I bet.
Yeah.
Aaron Leach also lives down here in Florida.
Okay. Now, I in my peripheral, overhearing things, I recall there was a buddy of mine who was doing some research once on the specific the changes in the Deus Officer god forms from grade to grade, that it's commonly thought of that it's, that's Isis, that's Thoth, that's, but that they actually change from grade to grade, and that it has to do with the way that Enochian chess is played, or it has to do with which one's the king and queen on the elementally or something like that.
You've got in the chess pieces, you've got 4 sets of those officers or divinities that are totally different from one another. So, I mean, it would make sense that in the 110 grade, you would be having Osiris and Isis, because those are the pieces in the game,
right?
And if you and then the very next degree, which would be, is it air in the Golden Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean that would be a totally different, and it would have like Khonsu and a bunch of other more airy gods in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's very possible.
I wonder how many Golden Dawn temples out there actually vary the god form up for the Deus Officer from Great Initiation to Great Initiation.
It's an interesting question. That's very sort of subtle, and I guess it's an Esoterinerd question, huh?
And you'd never be able to find out because they're the Deus Officers. So who's going to ask them?
Right. Are you visualizing? Or are you formulating Osiris here, or are you formulating?
Yeah. There was one imperator that I heard about. I don't know if it was Falcon or something like that, and he was able he would go around and say, you didn't put enough energy in this god form over here, and this one's too strong, and stuff like that. So the Hierophantria was thinking, who does this person think he is? And so she just put a red lion in the west just to test him. And so apparently he walked up and said, yeah, and this needs to go a little further south, like Africa. And then he just kept walking, and she was pretty blown away by that. But I don't know if that's a real story. It's just something that I heard.
Well, I mean, I'd like to believe that is a true story.
I know, right? I know. I have like a handful of experiences in my life that I can point to and say something was going on there. And
Sure.
So when I hear other people's stories, part of me just really wants to, believe it. But I've got that inner skeptic. My grandpa was a scientist on my mom's side, so I'm grateful for that.
I mean, that skeptic
is
an important part of your psychology and should never be sacrificed.
For sure, yeah.
It's fun to put him, in a cage for a little while and entertain all kinds of possibilities.
I heard another method where someone, every time you make a move and the god form lands on a piece, or maybe when the game's over, when the whole thing and all the pieces are left, then you can take you make a larger version of a truncated pyramid, and then you have individual colored and with the individual symbols, of each of the 4 sides and the tops. So you have, each of the letters, and so then you choose, the particular ones appropriate for that square, and then take the piece and put it on top, and then project yourself into the god form standing on the piece, and then open yourself up to your higher self to find out what the message is.
Well, I mean, that sounds somewhat similar to the stuff that was it the Schulers in their Enochian book?
Okay, yeah, I don't know the source on it. I overheard someone telling someone else to do that.
I think it's actually a legitimately Golden Dawn practice,
right?
That Rigardi talked about. Chick would probably be a good person, or Tabby would be good people to ask about this.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, they would apparently build truncated pyramids, and then there would be a sphinx for each one, so that would be based on the elements that were of the sides of the pyramid. So you'd have like a cobbled together beast that would have earth hooves and a lion's head and the wings of an eagle or whatever.
Like the developing of the talismanic images.
And right, and then there was a specific god form that was related to each one, and those were the same god forms that are in the Enochian chess set for sure. So I mean, yeah, it was kind of like and so it makes you kind of wonder, is Enochian chess as a game is it's an interesting thing, but how much could it actually be utilized for various forms of magic particularly Golden Dawn magic, since that's the only real context in which it would make any sense.
Right.
But the game board's interesting because it's comprised of the squares of the tablets that are not archangelic. It's all the ones that are the under the crosses,
Okay.
on the sides, and so it's basically
The ones above as well?
what?
Above the calling and commanding, above the commanding?
No, it's
Just the ones below.
just the below ones, which are all sort of just the angels, the subservient angels of the
Right.
squares. And so it's almost like you're just dealing with the blind forces of the elements without any of the controlling factors being in it. It was, as I think, where their heads were going with the creation of it. And so you have that feeling that it's just sort of like the stirring of things without the controlling names or the controlling angels. So
It seems like if not divination, I mean, it seems like it could be a good inspiration for fiction, particularly for someone who's a professional writer who has to come up with a new and funny and interesting and creative idea every week to just kind of like play some Enochian chess and then write it down and go, okay, so Nephthys is on the subservient angel heir of fire. What the heck does that mean? Oh, okay, we're going to bring in the mother-in-law and she's cooking and then the wind blows and everything catches on fire. Bam!
I would find it very interesting if they took a sitcom and assigned each of the
God forms,
the players to one of the and created a resultant story from that. That would be a very interesting way of approaching things. And I actually think, I mean,
Picard would clearly be the Hierophant.
I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, I think that what you're talking about is one of the most useful aspects of magic in general, which is that it can inspire us to bring things from the invisible into the visible in various ways, whether that's just like visual art or whether, like you're saying, like creating story forms from it. There have been a number of writers recently who have suggested those sorts of things. You could use the tarot to inspire you to write and stuff like that. And I think those are great things. And actually, Philip K. Dick agrees with me. Apparently, The Man in the High Castle was actually constructed entirely from I Ching readings.
Oh, cool.
So, that idea has been around for a while. Yeah, I mean, Philip K. Dick's an interesting writer. I don't know if you've ever...
I keep hearing that. I think I need to get into Philip K. Dick.
It's funny because he writes in the sci-fi genre, and some of it seems
he's inspired me indirectly through the movies,
For sure, yeah. No, but his writing is great. Anyway, not to.
Oh no, I don't mind.
Talk about my writing. Okay.
I don't mind diverging into sci-fi. Sci-fi is what actually interests me, and the reason why I don't know Enochian better than I do is because there's always some another Dune prequel to read. But
I do. To go into the even more nerdy, I do feel like a lot of people kind of mix up or conflate the three-dimensional chess from Star Trek with the Enochian chess.
That would be cool. I would like to see that.
Well, no, I think some people think that they're somehow related. That maybe the four different boards you're having.
Right. Maybe they ought to be like Star Trek kind of predicted, quote unquote, or invented the flip phone. And a lot of other technologies we have. Like maybe they predicted the use of. Well, it was Vulcans, and so Vulcans, angels, whatever.
Sure. I like the fact that Star Trek predicted or created an outdated technology.
Yeah.
So why do we not have warp engines and food being created by
those replicators? Well, if they really got into the replicator thing, then that it would completely. There was one episode where we're getting too nerdy, I think, but there was one episode where the bad guys were using food replicators to produce weapons.
Sure.
So if you can do that, then most of the episodes and most of the conflicts they ran into could easily be resolved through the replicator. Like any problem they had. So what are you doing? Why are you going across the universe? The replicator's right there. So that was It's sci-fi. I write some sci-fi myself. I have a sci-fi podcast and whatnot.
I love sci-fi. I write some sci-fi myself too.
Cool.
Although I haven't. I end up spending my time and energy on this things like making Enochian chess because an idea comes to me. By the way, I've literally been working on this Enochian chess thing for like 3 or 4 years.
Nice.
Off here and there. which is why I'm not as familiar with the gameplay, because we were playing it like literally 3 years ago, quite a bit, but I've been more focused on the art aspect of it for a while.
Right.
While I have the bully pulpit here, I want to mention a couple things about my work, because I feel like a lot of people aren't familiar with my work, or I feel like some people have heard of my name and they don't really know what it's all about. And I want to mention that I've got a website, jasonaugustusnewcomb.com, and on that site I've got about 200 different audio recordings, and these recordings are all guided meditations of one type or another. Some of them are direct, straight hypnosis things, but really only a few of them. Some of the things I'm most proud of that I've created are a set of 22 path workings for the Tree of Life, and they're really quite innovative. There's a couple other people who've recorded path working things before, and typically it's sort of like a tour, like an imaginary tour, like here, and then look to your left, and you can see the god Ptah in his temple, and there's a golden dagger on the ground, and you pick up the dagger and you put, and it's like this choose your own guided adventure that doesn't really necessarily have to do with anything other than what that author imagines a path might be like. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I did one of those actually in a couple episodes ago.
You mean you made one, or you?
Yeah, I did a Tav up to Yesod, but I fully admit that it's my own style of doing it. And I actually was very disheartened one time when a student came to me and said, "Oh, that way that you did the Tav path working that one time 4 years ago is how I've been going through Tav ever since." And I just did a face palm. I was like, okay, I did something wrong. Sorry. But I mean, on the other hand, for people who have trouble visualizing and they're like in there going, "No, I got nothing," then it gives them something to kind of anchor down to just to get through.
Absolutely. I've done those path workings a million times myself. I've actually led groups up in Massachusetts going through the Tree of Life a number of times, and we've done just that sort of stuff. And we actually did on a couple of occasions we ran through it, and basically every person would take a path, and so everyone would kind of go through each other's ideas of things.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting way of approaching it too. But my path workings are different because I really focus a lot on basically just very simple basic signposts and audio technology. I actually have different binaural beats and tones for the different energies, and so as you listen to them, you're basically being led through different layers of those things in all the different recordings. So they're quite unconventional in their structure. And if you sign up for my mailing list on my site, you actually can download the first one, the Tav Path, for free. They don't produce enlightenment, but they point out the direction toward becoming more centered and becoming more universal in your consciousness in a way that most path workings would not, just simply by the way that they're constructed. So I think they're a very cool thing, and something that I don't think enough people are really aware of.
Nice.
So hopefully your 10 million viewers or listeners will now be aware of it.
Well, there's the people that'll hear it this week, and then this will be up there in perpetuity, so people will hear this 5 years from now too. I'm catching up on some podcasts and some episodes from 2011 myself, and writing to the people saying, "That was really cool. I liked the point you made." They're like, "Dude, that was 5 years ago. What are you talking about?"
I don't even remember what I was thinking. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I'm really proud of that I've been working on for a while now is I have a set of incenses and oils that are sort of, they're based on traditional ingredients and so forth, but I've added a few things here and there to nothing that's like outside of the sort of language of those things, but I feel like I've produced a product. I mean, because most of your traditional incenses and oils that really go to like Grimoire, there's an animal brain or the heart of a pig in there somewhere, and I don't have any of that obviously in my stuff. So, yeah. But so I mean, they're all plant based.
Not synthetic.
There's nothing synthetic. It's all essential oils, gums, and woods, and there's no like filler woods. A lot of incenses will use just really sort of pretty skanky stuff, just to kind of give body to it, and then they'll just throw some oil in to and mine are all made from high grade stuff. So
Nice.
I'm very proud of them, and I sell them on Amazon and on my site, and occasionally on eBay too. But Amazon's probably the place to look for them. And it's just called New Hermetics incense and New Hermetics oils, and the oils and the incense are totally related to each other. So and so like really what I have been trying to create with this stuff is a way of getting into these magical realities in a way that's very sort of consistent. If you use a particular incense and you listen to a particular sound every single time that you're working with that energy, it really begins to affect you in a much more profound way than if you just sort of haphazardly approach things. And so not a whole lot of people are along for the ride with me so far, but those that are,
it happens every day. Like when you hear that Game of Thrones theme and you pop open that beer, it's the same thing. The smell,
right.
The sound, the people, everything. It's a sacred act, and everybody's having similar emotions. And it's kind of a canned ritual, as compared to something that you and I might do in a temple. But it's definitely the same principle, and you can see it even more with theater.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, or any form of theater, including movies, they do stimulate you in this way that draws you to different states and stages in your consciousness. So
yeah.
I mean, it's great stuff. So I would love for people to come and check it out on my website if they can, and to buy an Enochian chess set too, and to use it for divination. And you can, I have incense for the 4 elements. So if you wanted to like only burn my earth incense when you're playing on the earth chess set, I think that it would make your experience of that chess play much more magical, just inherently.
Yeah. Well, you had me with the humor. That's an element that isn't always present. I mean, it's the combination of the serious magician and the humor.
Well, I actually, after I launched it, it occurred to me, has anyone ever done anything funny with
Enochian chess? With
Enochian chess, I think I'm the first.
I've done one or two funny occult things. I have a stand-up routine called "You Might Be an Initiate," but has a very limited appeal. But there's a few people. There's the Colorado Temple. They have the Sesame Street God forms. And,
okay.
There's a few funny things in Golden Dawn here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a humorist first and foremost. I actually became interested in the occult. Well, that's not true. I realized that I really could create magic in my life very easily at about the age of 18. And I like I said, I started reading books at 12 and 13. I did a bunch of rituals and stuff in my teens. But the time when I really said, I think this magic is something that I could apply myself in a way that's going to change my life for the positive, was a very unmagical act. And I was about to perform stand-up comedy for the first time.
Nice.
And I said to myself, I'm going to create a little talisman for Thalia, the muse of comedy, and I'm going to put it in my pocket, and I'm going to bring it with me to this thing. And it was it was just a very simple, crude magical act that didn't involve a whole lot of ceremony, and I crushed it.
Nice.
It was probably one of the better stand-up performances I've ever had.
Yeah.
Not in terms of my material, but in terms of the reaction of the crowd and how much, it all just went really well. And I went, that was because of my talisman in so many ways, because of I approached it differently because I had that talisman. And that's kind of been my philosophy of magic, that magic is something, and I've become more conscious of it as I've gotten older. But magic is something that we do when we realize we're facing odds that are incalculably against us, and we need to have something to help us a little bit, and even if it's an irrational thing that's not really going to help anything, doing that magical act gives us more strength to move forward. And I think that's one of the reasons why magic as a profession has always existed and probably will always exist, because most people they're too lazy, or they don't know how to make something magical for themselves. So if they can get someone else to give them some sort of magical object that they can keep with them, it's just as powerful, if not more powerful, than them doing it for themselves, because they're putting their faith in that outside force and what they've done. So
right.
Magic is something that I think is very useful. Although I think that your current path of yoga and meditation.
Well, they definitely overlap. I have a podcast called To Be a Yogi and another podcast called The Esoterinerd, and the only reason I keep them separate is because most people think of them separately. The people who are into yoga aren't going to be into a smorgasbord of stuff that includes yoga here on the side,
right?
And people who are interested in the occult aren't necessarily going to immediately be interested in yoga. But my intent, well, one of my ulterior motives is to sort of lure people over out of the books and just to not permanently put down the magic wand, but just long enough to do some stretches, because you really enjoy the rituals a lot better after a good yoga set. But what you were saying just now about the talisman reminds me. Recently, I've been discovering that when I close my eyes and use basically the God form method, just sort of a quick God form method of becoming the image of Shiva, the yogi of all yogis,
sure.
Right before I teach my class, that's when I hit it out of the park.
I mean, absolutely, and right there, that's my new hermetics right there. What you just said, you don't actually have to physically make a talisman. You can just make a talisman in your consciousness, and that's the same. You're tapping into the same thing.
Yeah.
And often those magical acts, and this is you mentioned something else that I want to get back to with the building Enochian tables in a second. Often those magical acts that we do spontaneously with very little pre-thought have more impact on our lives than those that we put huge amounts of study, time, research, and physical construction into, simply because those little simple magical acts are purely coming from the need to make something happen, or the desire to make something happen, or the circumstances. Whereas that research project, we've almost put more interest and energy into the construction of the thing than the actual whatever the end goal was.
Right. And
so it's kind of it's contained within the object itself rather than the magic. So I think it's interesting how many people spend a huge amount of time constructing magical tools. Now, I sell some magical tools, so I don't want to discourage people from doing this entirely. but my next commercial is going to deal with well, no, it might not be my next commercial, but one of the commercials that I'm going to do relatively soon is going to deal with my magical circle cloths. I don't know if you've seen those but I think those are great. I love.
Oh, I have seen those. Yeah,
I love to be within them because I feel like they really do. They contain your energy in a really special way. But not inherently because of them, but just being in a physical circle is an empowering experience, and a very brightly colored one is very powerful. So, but a lot of people spend so much time and energy constructing things, and then they don't actually do anything at all with them. So it almost seems to me like it would be easier if they just started doing their ritual work and developing their inner visionary skills and developing their ability to move energies in their bodies, their ability to connect with things outside of themselves, and let the construction of those things happen as it will if it needs to,
right,
rather than the other way around, because then you end up with this very expensive, elaborate temple equipment and no idea what to do with it because you just have no experience with anything other than, painting temple equipment.
Right.
I mean, especially like that Golden Dawn temple stuff. I've seen a number of people who just spend so much time and energy building every single piece of regalia for the Golden Dawn stuff.
Yeah, and rebuilding and repainting and not being satisfied with and doing it over again. And yeah.
And then I'm going to get to the rituals once I have all
Well, I mean, on the other hand, I have a few tools that are yellowing a little bit, and McGregor Mathers said at one point that it's better to have no tool at all than one that's dirty or yellowing, that you could provoke the opposite force and all this stuff.
I almost feel directly opposite of that personally. I feel like if I have an object that is too new and shiny looking, I can't even see that it's magical at all. But once it's been smeared with ritual oil,
like an old rosary.
Yeah,
in that movie about Fatima, there was the man. You used up all the blessings. You need a fresh rosary.
Right.
New rosaries for old ones. It's funny.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the magical revival that probably began in the 60s has kind of been, maturing into an entirely new sort of thing. And there's all kinds of different directions in which we can go. And I think to get back to circle back around to what I was my starting point of it was, I think utilizing these things to enhance our actual life goals is really the most useful thing to do with it.
While you're, if I may interject, because that reminds me, the least useful I wanted to mention is using it to isolate oneself and feed into a state of paranoia, and even least useful than that is to bring other people down with you. And I've experienced that, which is kind of why Enochian and a few other Golden Dawn elements have left a sour taste in my mouth, and yoga hasn't.
Well, so. I mean, the paranoia is one, and also megalomania, or just like
they go together. Yeah, like, megalomaniacs tend to be paranoid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I honestly think that's a personality type, and that person is, if they were to join, a book club, they would end up doing the same thing. Their understanding of the book is way better than anyone else's.
Yeah.
So I don't think
deep
we can
into darkness when it, with stuff like this, with the unknown and with the spiritual and with
for sure
read it backwards and it's demonic.
Yoga has a cleaner aspect to it, although I think
there's Bikram.
I mean, there's certainly
it's always the exception.
Yeah, and I think that and even outside of that, there's lots of possibilities for people to kind of congratulate themselves over much for being able to stretch well.
Yeah, and not actually get any of it.
Yeah.
Any degree. Yeah.
Because I used to go to a class in Los Angeles when I lived out there, and there would be some girls in there who had clearly been doing ballet since they were 2 years old, and they could just do some amazing things that no one else in the class could.
And
possibly.
Then roll their eyes and judge the person next to them. It's like, I don't think you know the basics of yoga.
What's that?
And then it's like, I don't think you know the basics of yoga.
Right, you're not really here for the right reason.
Yeah. I want to show off how much I can stretch.
I do like to show off how much I can.
Yeah,
stretch.
Me too. Yeah, who am I kidding? But I'm in the front of the class and everybody's looking at me, so I have to.
Did you have any other questions about Enochian chess or about?
So its origin is in the original Golden Dawn, as far as we know, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it seems like it comes from Westcott was a chess aficionado, and I think he saw in those lesser squares that there was a chessboard hidden in the tablet.
I see,
and I think that's where it came from. Honestly,
that makes sense.
We could say no. It was the Continental Adepts who had been holding it back in the Akashic records, and finally allowed it to come into physical manifestation. But I mean, I honestly think it was more. It was a production of some guys who were in a fever of esoteric creativity and created a lot of amazing things that are still having repercussions throughout the world, even today, over 100 years later. So, almost 150 years later.
Yeah.
So I think it's a cool thing, even if its origin really is only in the Golden Dawn. And,
right.
And the idea of the tablets and their elemental and sub-elemental nature, I mean, that seems to begin really with the Golden Dawn as well. Although I think that there's a book that precedes the Golden Dawn that mentions it somewhat, but it was more elaborated by the Golden Dawn.
Yeah, it was all laid out flat, and then Mathers looked at it and thought, "Hey, we could make a cube out of this and put one over there and one over there." Yeah.
So I mean, I think that. We can in the same way that we were just talking about utilizing it for creativity, either directly or indirectly, we can take that idea and we can utilize it in a number of ways to create meaningful connections in our lives, and also we can play it as a fun board game too.
Yeah, and a way to learn about those gods that are the subtle differences between the different elements, and so it's a teaching tool and a fun game and a way to honor our eccentric sort of our collective eccentric ancestors back in wherever in the world you come from. We're all one family, and we're cousins of the fish and the insects and all that. So
no, I just want to again plug all my stuff. It's those kids in that commercial, they eat a lot, and and they need to be supported. And so I have my site, JasonAugustusNewcomb.com, has a ton of downloadable stuff. A lot of it's actually for free too. There's some things that are more initiatory, and there's some seasonal stuff, and all of that utilizes the different tones that I was mentioning. And so just listening to that free stuff, you'll see if you listen to it a number of times, you'll see how it does kind of change your consciousness as long as you're going along with it the first few times and really trying to enter into those energies. You'll find that you're just starting to go in there automatically as you're going forward. It's quite cool stuff, and I'd love to have more people partaking of it and more people aware of it. My other products, I've got a ton of stuff. With a partner, I'm making a bunch of different talismans from different grimoire traditions. We've got all the Goetic talismans. We've got the black pullet talismans made in satin and bronze steel for the rings. They're super cool if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
Nice.
That can be found on Etsy.com at the shop name is Enochian Antiquarian. And there's some other stuff on that site too.
Antiquarian?
Antiquarian.
So like antique aquarian?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Enochian Antiquarian. And that's that stuff. I also have my incense and oils. I've got my circles. So I've got like a mazillion. I've got probably somewhere right around 1,000 different products if you consider each of the individual components available in the world. So you can spend all of the money that you have in the world to have all of the coolest things in the world if you want to.
Well, again, thank you very much for joining us on the Esoterinerd podcast.
It was my pleasure. It was really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. And I hope to have you on again. If you come out with a book or anything like that, feel free to drop me a line if you want to come on here and let people know about it.
I will absolutely stay in touch, and there will be more commercials coming. So
nice.
I hope that people continue watching them and sharing them.
Cool.
It was a little surprising how many people watched those.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jason Augustus Newcomb, for joining us on the Esoterinerd podcast tonight. Thank you to Susumu Ueda for arranging the music we're listening to right now, and to his father and the other monks at the Jofuku Inn Temple on Mount Koyasan, singing sacred chants, the medieval Japanese approximations of Sanskrit and Pali words, the same chants heard in all languages. Special thanks to David Bowie, to John D. and Edward Kelly, to William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Little McGregor Mathers. And Budge. Don't forget Budge. We see you over there in the library. We know you helped out. Stairway to Heaven. Silly Budge. And most importantly, thank you to you, the Esoterinerd, listening to this podcast. Until next time, good night.